What's up guys, it's Blue TTCG back with another Vanguard deck profile. This time it's going to be for Premium, and today I'm going to present a very abominable Angel Feather build for Premium that I haven't really been too open about until now, but it's time to show the world what Angel Feather can pull off ever since Premium Collection 2022. The style of this video is going to be a little different because I don't have all the equipment I normally have for my videos as I did in the past, but please bear with me for this one. I hope you guys enjoy it nonetheless. Let's go right into it. So before we dive into the contents of the main deck and such, I do want to point out that, as you probably saw in the title of this video, this is a 15 crit build of Angel Feather. So a lot of the decisions are based around making the most out of that. Keep in mind that, of course, it comes at the sacrifice of defensive power, and you have to adjust your playstyle with this deck accordingly. So this typically means that with this kind of build, we're focused on greeting for first stride, which means that basically if your opponent refuses to collaborate with you in terms of riding up, then you stay on grade 2 until there's an opportunity for you to get first stride right when you ride into grade 3. Otherwise, you're not really getting that much because the Gavrail turn with 15 crits is not as good as it ordinarily would be with one of their strides such as Zafkiel or Gavrail Eden. This is especially the case when they damage deny you because you won't have enough damage to go right into your 3 counterblast Hamiel without some Jophiels, which you might not be able to see if you go right into grade 3. So this goes for going first and going second. So now with that in mind, let's go ahead and go right into the contents of the main deck. So as you can see, the starter we're running here is Medical Kit Angel. This is the V-Series starter here. And we're running the V-Series starter instead of Muriel because we actually want the Quick Shield. Now, typically, of course, you're not always guaranteed the Quick Shield, but the main function of the Quick Shield in this deck is another pseudo card for us to use the damage swap into damage exploit, so to speak, where we're allowed to heal a card without actually having heal triggers in our deck. This is accomplishable with cards such as Gavrail Prim and Zabaniya. This is, of course, G-era Zabaniya. And these two cards, the special thing about them that they share is that they have wording, which allows them to put a card from our hand to the damage zone. And that's part of the cost. And because it's part of the cost, the card that gets put in the damage zone doesn't have to be necessarily part of the cost, but in general, whenever a card says put a card into the damage zone, a pseudo card is a legitimate candidate for such a skill. And because pseudo cards cannot exist in spaces other than their original place, which is the hand in this case, the card will immediately disappear and allow us to basically get a heal, a net heal. We're making use of Zabaniya in this deck with that in mind. But the Quick Shield is another one of those cards we can make use of the exploit with, which is why the V-Series starter is necessary. The card draw on top of that is not really anything to write home about, but it is very good, as people will probably tell you on the Vanguard internet and other decks, and this deck is probably no exception in that regard. But keep in mind, we're running this card not because of the draw power itself, but because of the Quick Shield. Now, this does not mean that we want to always ride up after our opponent. We do actually want to just ride up to grade 1 as you ordinarily would. But typically, if you go second, you do definitely want to get that Quick Shield. So make sure to do ride up. And also, the reason why we don't want to stay on grade 0 per se just for that Quick Shield is because we don't have Heal Guardians, which our opponent does not know, and they would be very suspicious if we were to stay on grade 0 with that in mind. So just make sure you remember that when you're running this deck and when you are deciding whether to run the V-Series starter or Muriel. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the trigger lineup. To start off the trigger lineup, we're running a suite of 12 crits. As you can see here, we're running 4 of the Stride Fodder crit, 4 of the Premium Collection 2019 crit, and 4 of the Sentinel crit from V-Series. Now these crits combined allow us to get the most power out of our critical triggers, as well as have an effect where we can. The most important of these being, of course, the Stride Fodder, but sometimes the GB1 put into Soul plus 10 draw a card does come up, but most of the time we're actually not really starving for Soul in this deck per se. And then the 30k shield, of course, can be very useful in lieu of a Heal Guardian because we're not running those. So do keep in mind it might be cool to keep a Sentinel crit with this deck if you feel like you're going to be rushed down early on. But with these 12 crits, it allows us to very consistently get the Hamiel win condition off on our first stride. And for the triggers that round off the rest of our trigger lineup, we've got 3 more crits, 2 of them being a generic V-Series critical trigger. The one I chose here was Samyaza. You can also choose critical hit Angel or basically any other V-Series card that Angel Feather has available. And then we're running 1 copy of Nutrient Angel. This is probably my favorite critical trigger in the deck, just because its ability actually does come up quite often, where I'm running out of Counterblast, or maybe I didn't manage them well, or maybe the opponent gave me 2 damage instead of 3. So I need basically an extra damage face up in order to have it prepared for a Hamiel strike. This card does come up quite often, but we're only running the 1 copy because it is a 5k trigger, and also the situations where you actually need it are not too frequent, so I wouldn't say it's a necessary card to max out or anything. But if you'd like, you can definitely do so. There's lots of room in the trigger lineup for those kinds of things. And finally, we're running 1 over trigger. This is the Crayelemental one, Olbaria. The double 100 mil is phenomenal, in my opinion, more so than the drive checks that Amartanoa gives. But if you're a fan of drive checks on the rear guards, then go for it. Amartanoa is no problem in this deck. However, I found, in my opinion, the double 100 mil to be incredible, especially when a Hamiel's on the rear guard circle, because it allows you more flexibility in giving your Vanguard plus 100 mil, as well as the Hamiel. So do keep that in mind. And that's going to do for this trigger lineup. Let's go ahead and check out what's going on in the grade 1s. So to start off the grade 1s in this deck, we're going to begin with the pair of 4-ofs, 4 grade 3 Searcher Nakir, and 4 Jophiel. I've always talked about Jophiel in a positive manner on this channel if you guys have watched my previous videos on Angel Feather and Premium, but I believe Jophiel to be the best grade 1 in the entire deck. And especially in this deck, there's no exception. This is what allows us to basically reach the inevitable, which is our Hamiel win condition to OTK our opponent essentially on our first stride. If not for Jophiel, I do not think this deck would be at the potential it is at the moment. So do keep in mind the Jophiel allows everything that we need. And typically, because we're going for our combo turn on our first stride, you don't really have any trouble seeing around 2 or 3 of these by then. 2 is pretty typical. In the past, if you were to do the combo on the grade 3 turn, you might only see 1 or even 0 by the time you get there, which is typically not enough because the opponent will not have given you enough damage for that to be sufficient. However, keep in mind, if we go for the grade 2 game and our opponent plays along, then we'll be able to keep critting them, and we'll eventually find enough Jophiels in our hand where if they at one point decide to cave in and ride up to grade 3, then we'll have all the Jophiels needed to kill them right away when we go into our stride the following turn. So Jophiel's flat out amazing. And then of course Nakir. Nakir allows us to more consistently get the grade 3s requisite to go for the combo. The only reason we are looking for more grade 3s is because we're running only 8 of them in this build, and the most important part of our grade 3s is getting the protect marker so that we have another pseudo card for the exploit if necessary. But also just because the protect marker gives us another perfect guard in our hand, which is very useful because, again, we're not running heal triggers at all. So our defense is a little limited if it comes to that. So for Nakir, and the other thing about Nakir that's great, on top of her, of course, being a 13k booster very easily, that condition for the 5k is pretty free, especially compared to some other grade 3 searches that are around, is that after you find a grade 3 off of the grade 3 search, you discard a card. And this happens to synergize, this happens to synergize very well with the new strat we got, Zafkiel. So do keep in mind that you can set up some triggers in the drops and early on if you'd like. But this is not 100% necessary, so don't sweat if you don't feel like you can get a trigger in there off of this card's skill safely. Because, sometimes you do need that trigger as defense in your hand. The last couple of grade 1s we've got in the deck are 3 copies of Zophiel, 3 copies of Lyla, and 1 copy of Sartael. Now, I feel like the one that's least surprising here is Zophiel. Zophiel is another one of our damage checkers, which allows us to more easily get into multiple criticals on our Hamiel. And also, she allows us to net countercharge because when she discards a card as cost, she adds any card from damage in the hand, which of course can be a face down card as well. And because of this, this allows us to get our counterblast back a lot more easily. Now, to keep in mind, another important part about her is the first skill on hit draw card when she's on Vanguard Circle. So this happens to be your best first ride when you're going second. But at the same time, you don't always want to ride into this because it's an 8k base. So if you want to swing under your opponent and keep them at low damage because this deck can OTK anyway, then you do want to make sure to ride a lower power card, which leads us to our next card, Black Talent Lyla. This is probably my favorite grade 1 in the deck. Not the best one per se, but I just found that having her in this spot in the deck has been like the best fit I've ever had for her in any of my Angel Feather decks that I built for the premium format. Now, her first skill is not too impressive per se, but it does come up quite often, where if a new card was put into your drop zone from the damage zone during your turn, it gets plus 6k, which allows it to be a 13k booster similar to Nakir. Now, of course, that aspect is redundant, but redundancy is all what we're looking for because this is a fast-paced combo deck that seeks to kill on the first ride, so keep that in mind. The second skill is the one that's kind of more of note. It's a GB2, and allows us to, when it's placed on the Vanguard Circle from damage zone, Soul Blast 1, and Rescue. So because of that, if we go into Gavrail Eden, we have access to another means of countercharging off of our Hamiel combos or Zabaniya as well, because they both call from damage zone. So keep in mind Lyla's available second skill if you go into Gavrail Eden or if you're at GB2 in general. Now if you go into Zafkiel, because Zafkiel does not flip, you won't be able to get Lyla off, but Lyla is still a 13k booster, which is pretty solid. And as I mentioned earlier, Zophiel is an 8k base, Lyla is a 7k base. So this card is actually not bad at all to ride, because it allows you to swing under and keep your opponent at low damage so that you can kill them from 0 to 6 without giving them the damage they need to kill you. And finally, we've got one copy of Sartael. This is probably the card that I like the least in this deck, just because it's a little slow, but I just wanted another 7k card to basically fill slots. There's a lot of space for like plenty of flexible cards in this deck, so I feel like Sartael is definitely one of them. She's one of the spots where you can probably fill her with another copy of Lyla if you wanted to, or any other card you see fit that's available in either G-Era or V-Series. But her ability to recover triggers should still be respected because it allows you to get back over trigger, for example, if you find that in your drop zone, or it allows you to get any other important normal unit that you need to see back in your deck as soon as possible, along with giving you a card in the soul. Keep in mind it is a GP1 though, so it's not as good as it sounds. So that's all for the grade 1s. Let's now go into the grade 2s. We're going to start off with, of course, the girl herself, Japhkiel. Now, Japhkiel is one of those cards that I feel like I'm kind of a broken record in explaining how great of a card she is and why she is almost 100% necessary to slot in any Angel Feather deck that can slot her. This card gives you a lot of utility in adding a card from deck to hand, or excuse me, damage zone to hand, as well as giving you another damage check, which is what we're looking for the Hamiel stuff. Keep in mind she's a hard once per turn, of course, but she's also your best ride target because she allows you to do stuff on your ride without having to commit anything else from your hand for that turn. And plus, that +1 is sweet, so sweet. So we're still running 4 copies of her, of course, in this kind of deck that relies on Hamiel. So lastly, for our grade 2 lineup, we've got 3 copies of Zabaniya and 3 copies of Salaphiel. So Zabaniya, I talked about her a little earlier, but actually I really love this card in this deck. She's another form of rescue without actually having a hard once per turn, or any form of once per turn for that matter, and she also triggers her auto ability when placed from anywhere on the rearguard circle. So she's another one of those phenomenal cards that we can make use of to get extra crits stacked on her Hamiel. Not to mention that she has the pseudocard exploit built into her cost because it does say choose a card from your hand, which includes pseudo-cards generated by our Imaginary Gift Protect 1, as well as our Quick Shield token that we get when we ride for our opponents on grade 1. And then we've got 3 copies of Salaphiel. So, because Zabaniya places another card before she does her rescue tech, she allows you to be linked to your other on places, such as Salaphiel, such as Japhkiel, etc. So Salaphiel, being the card that you can go into off of Zabaniya, is great for battle phase multi-attacking. If you're not able to get Hamiel for whatever reason, or your opponent denial griffins it, or perhaps you've already done your Hamiel and they survive somehow, then you can actually go into your Gavrail Eden attack and call both Zabaniya and another card to the rearguard circle behind Zabaniya, and then use Zabaniya's skill to call Salaphiel, which gives you a beat stick without having to commit too much from your hand or elsewhere. And keep in mind, Salaphiel has an on place too. When she Soul Blasts to heal and deal 1, she's a net counter charge. So both these cards provide a very important aspect to this deck's, what this deck seeks to do, which is continue those damage checks to get all the crits on her Hamiel, which is, consistently, Hamiel will be at 6 or 7 crits if you do the turn right, especially with Zafkiel in mind. So Salaphiel, again, great card. And make sure that you do keep her at 3 copies along with Zabaniya, because Zabaniya is a GB1 card, so she won't be active early game until you go into your stride. And Salaphiel is a hard once per turn. So I mentioned several times on the channel before that hard once per turn is a little cloggy, so you do want to make sure to not run too many of them. And these are the last cards in our main deck. We've got the grade 3s here. Of course, 4 copies of the most important card that we're running here, Hamiel, and 4 copies of her supporting boss unit, Gavrail. This is the V-Series one. And the reason why we're running the V-Series Gavrail rather than our OG Gavrail, any copies of it, is that we actually just want the Protect marker. We don't really care about V-Series Gavrail's actual skill, other than her name and the fact that she has Imaginary Gift on her skill icons. That's all we really care about V Gavrail for. The reason for this is that we always want to greed for First Stride. First Stride allows your Hamiel pop-off turn, OTK turn, to be way scarier than any sort of V Gavrail turn or other V-Series turn that you can assemble. So keep in mind that don't get too caught up in trying to use V Gavrail's skill if you find yourself riding up to grade 3 first. Now, of course, you shouldn't ever really ride up to grade 3 first. Of course, use your discretion on that still, but generally your first stride is a lot better with Zafkiel or with Gavrail Eden. And finally, we've got 4 copies of Hamiel. Typically, you won't be riding into this card. You'll be using her as your rearguard attacker. Now, also make sure that you stack all of your crits on Hamiel, because she's the attack that your opponent won't be able to guard in most instances if you get it to a high enough number early on. And keep in mind, the reason why we want First Stride as well is because our opponent will be at grade 3, which means that they cannot use Heal Guardians. And Heal Guardians are actually worse for Hamiel's ability to kill, rather than most G Guardians are at that stage of the game. I know there are a lot of new good G Guardians out ever since Premium Collection 2022. And pardon me, I know I keep saying Premium Collection, I meant P-Clan Collection. Excuse me on that. But a lot of the new G Guardians are good at reducing crit or perfect guarding from G Zone, both of which get around what Hamiel can do best. But these are typically not online that early on. They're more online if they have a certain condition, like for Shadow Paladin, they have to have put 5 grade 1s from drop zone into the deck, which is pretty hard to fulfill by that stage of the game. And some other G Guardians need some counterblast or some other situations set up in order to make the best out of them. And that means that if you get First Stride, your opponent will not have that. So that allows our Hamiel to basically get away with murder. OTKing the opponent from 1 to 6 or from 0 to 6 even, that's pretty possible. Now, of course, if you're stuck at grade 2 for a long time, meaning that you're playing the grade 2 game with your opponent, they'll probably be at more damage, which is fine. You can still damage deny them if you like, because we don't really care about giving them that much damage. We just need one swing with Hamiel in order to kill them. But also remember, matchups can differ. If they have a Denial Griffin play, you gotta respect that. And also, if you feel like Denial Griffin or any sort of battle phase shenanigans on Hamiel will get in the way, you can run that Overdress grade 2 that gives your rearguards a pseudo resist, as long as that grade 2 is on the front row rearguard circle. I'll put the image for this in the editing, but keep in mind that is an option. There's a lot of room in this build for that. You can cut down V Gavrail by 1 if you'd like, or you could even cut Sartael from the grade 1 lineup. Plenty of flexibility in this main deck. But as long as you get to that Hamiel win condition with the 15 crits, that's all you need. Alright, enough with the main deck. Let's go ahead and talk about the G Zone now. So starting off, we got 4 copies of Gavrail Eden. Gavrail Eden is your main way of working around a 0 damage deny that your opponent gives you, because typically 0 damage deny means that you won't be able to even use V Gavrail or Jophiel to give yourself bonus damage that will allow you to get the 3 counterblasts necessary for Hamiel. However, Gavrail Eden has wording such that We don't need any damage in our damage zone in order to get ourselves another damage, because all she does is Soul Blast 1 and Persona Flip, and then you choose a card in your damage zone, heal it. But it does not say if you did. It does not say if you returned a card. It does not say if you healed. It just says do it, and then choose your Vanguard to deal 1 damage, which means that if you have no damage, you'll still be able to deal yourself 1 damage, giving yourself a net 1 damage to allow you to get the rest of your counter blasts with the Jophiel. That will allow you to get to 3 damage easily. So keep in mind, Gavrail Eden's actually still very important in this deck, and at 4 copies, we are allowed to see her more often just in case we need her. Plus, that actual second ability with the multi-attacking can allow us to get some swings in if our opponent decides to denial Griffin us or whatever, or if the Hamiel wasn't enough. So Gavrail Eden's actually a very good card in this deck. And keep in mind, because we're not running any heal triggers, it gives us more room to run additional strides under our G-Zone, because after all, we don't really need G-Guardians when we can't even go into them. Next up is 3 copies of Zafkiel. Now, I will note these are my old proxies. These are not real Zafkiels, so I just want to get that out of the way before someone writes an angry comment. All right, so anyway, this card is the best stride to go into on your first stride, just because it just offers so much to what this deck can accomplish. Getting 6 drive or some potential power bonus to your front row allows for your Hamiel to really more easily kill on that first stride. Plus, because she allows you to recover pieces from your drop zone and set up your damage zone accordingly, on top of countercharging on all of that, man, this card is such a house. I'm not kidding, guys. This card is insane, and I do hope that you guys start to realize that Angel Feather can really do stuff in Premium, even without this card. But with this card, man, the sky's the limit. I'm not joking. I'm very serious. Now, on top of this, if you need to go into some other strides, such as another Zafkiel, by the way, which is an option, or Gavrail Eden, keep in mind that Zafkiel does not give you any generation break except for herself, meaning she does not G-flip. So you'll be at GB1 for this stride if you ever go into her, which means that you won't be able to get cards like Lyla off. However, you'll still be able to get Zabaniya, so it's not a huge deal. And the rest of our rescue checkers, of course, are still able to go off because they don't require any sort of generation break. But yeah, Zafkiel is amazing, and I feel like 6 drive, even without 6 drive, I mean, 4 drive is flat out good. 4 drive 20k is good. 5 drive 10k is good. All the permutations that you can achieve with this card are phenomenal, and the fact that she can recover pieces is just going to make her so good in this build. So I hope you guys will be able to make use of her to the maximum if you try out this build. All right, next up is 2 copies of Gavrail. This is OG Gavrail, the stride one, of course. This card you never go into because you don't really need it. However, sometimes getting a battle phase rescue check can allow you to get the counter charges if you weren't able to get them previously. However, usually if you've already planned by that point, then you probably would not have gone into this card because you do need GB2 in order to use its skill, which means that it wouldn't have been your first stride anyway, and your second stride Zafkiel is always gonna be better than this card. But it is an option still because we have plenty of space in the G zone, so feel free to replace this with any other card you'd like. So the next card we're running is kind of a formality. It's 2 copies of Basasael. You don't really need this card, or at least you don't need to go into it at all. But most opponents, if they see you're running Angel Feather, would probably expect this card. So I guess you can flip it by the cost of Raphael, Mitra, or some other card that can do so, just try to throw them off or something. But we never really want to go into this card because we'll have hopefully killed them before we'd ever need to go into a card that allows us to extend our damage necessary to die. But it is there just as an insurance or as a formality if you'd like to look at it that way. Regardless, though, it's not a bad card on its own. It's just that we don't need it for this build. And next up, this will conclude the rest of the cards that we don't need in this build, but we're running more so to just fill the G-Zone as a formality. We're running 1 copy of Vellator Terminal, the GB8 that Angel Feather has. It's actually a pretty good GB8 on its own. It's just that we're never at that point, you know what I mean? So not necessarily what we need. However, being able to heal 5 and give your front row plus 10 up to that amount, or even more if you went into Basasael previously, is not half bad, and your opponent will probably have to respect it to some degree. But we don't actually need this card, so keep in mind it's more so for formality. If you're looking to buy this card and it's too expensive, then I wouldn't go for it. You can fill the G-Zone with other stuff that's cheaper. Next up is Raphael Mitra. There's actually supposed to be 2 copies of this card in this deck, but I think I lost my other one. I'll have to see in the stuff that I've packed up, but I'll check that later. Regardless though, there's supposed to be 2 copies of this, so keep that in mind. But basically, if we need to heal, then we can go into this card, but it's generally not the best thing to do because just healing as our stride is basically clashing with the whole purpose of this deck, which is to kill our opponent on the first stride. So we're never going to need this usually. But if you're in that position, then sure, go for it. You can flip up something else that you don't want your opponent to... you can flip up something else that will conceal the rest of your game plan if you'd like, such as maybe a Basasael, which they'd probably expect, or a Black Seraph Gavrail, which, you know, is kind of useless anyway, and they probably wouldn't think too much about what you're trying to run. And then finally, we've got 2 copies of the original Raphael, which is the much better one. However, it is a GP2, which makes it less useful for this build because we're not really trying to do anything else other than kill them on their first and maybe second stride if it comes to that. So healing a card, a single card for that matter, even if it doesn't cost that much, is just not what we're looking for. But it is there again as an insurance to make sure that we don't die to some fast-paced strategy that we didn't prepare for. And yeah, that's going to do it, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm not joking when I say that this deck can really pack a punch, and it's probably one of the most scary versions of what Angel Feather can accomplish in Premium. I'm not sure though, because we will have to see how it does in an environment where maybe people know about it, maybe they don't. But regardless, I do feel like this deck is extremely strong at cheesing out opponents in best of 1, because most people will not really expect a 15 crit build. They will not see what's coming when you stay on grade 2 and greed for first stride and then basically instantly kill them from 1 or 0 to 6. So do keep in mind that the secrecy of this deck is probably what enables its highest strength, but at the same time, it really very closely mirrors what was banned in V Premium not too long ago. So we'll see how it does. We'll see what happens about it, but I'll try to be bringing it to competitive events when I can, but I unfortunately won't be participating in BRO soon. So, because I still need to finish up with moving and all that stuff. Regardless though, I do hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please feel free to leave a like and a comment, and please subscribe as well. It really helps the channel out. I'll probably be uploading videos with more frequency after I'm kind of settled and stuff. But regardless, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time.